Welcome to Journey Through the Gate, your paranormal portal podcast, as we delve into the many questions and wonders brought on by the supernatural experience. What's on the other side of the gate? Let's find out together. Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to this side of the gate. And tonight we have something just a little bit different, but intriguing nonetheless. Now, settle in, because tonight I have former criminal defense attorney and legal analyst for CNN, ESPN, and USA Today. He has written over 25 books. He is more than a respected author. He is someone I have read multiple writings of his, and I've just been absolutely flabbergasted and amazed and intrigued all at the same time. And quite a few times I've been very angry, and you're going to find out tonight why. Tonight we are going through the gate with Mr. Mark Shaw. Come in, Mark.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's wonderful. Now, tonight, let's tell the listeners a little bit about you. I've announced you in on all of your wonderful credentials, but tell us a little bit about you tonight.
Mm-hmm. Well, my investigative reporting and what I did as an attorney, it goes back to my having begun as a public defender and then private practice with as a criminal defense lawyer, mostly all murder cases. I graduated from there into being a legal analyst for the networks, as you said, with the Mike Tyson and Kobe Bryant and O.J. Simpson cases. And so, when I got into writing, most of my books have to do with the questions of justice or injustice. A lot of them have to do with women. I'm a big women's rights advocate. And so there's a theme through my books that way, and what I try to do is to find as many facts as I can from primary sources. I don't speculate in my books, and present those stories to people. They usually have a historical bent to them, the books too, and then people can make up their own mind about what they believe, and that's true with all of the books, including the new one that I've written, Denial of Justice.
Absolutely. I can totally see through your books how you've kind of gotten to where you are and what you're doing now. And that, of course, when you have a background like that, the things you say, people pay a little bit more attention to it. You demand a little bit more respect and a little bit more, not yourself, but just out of your credentials. I mean, it makes more sense. They say if a man is saying this, he must have a little bit of behind it. And I love the way you write. It's just amazing. So tonight we're here to take our listeners on a little journey. And it's one that they might very well be familiar with. And some just might have their heads just so filled with so much bunk that they don't know which way to look. And that, of course, I'm talking about the JFK assassination and all of the things that kind of spiderwebbed from that.
Oh, good way to put it.
Well, it's absolutely the truth. I mean, it's just like, I don't know how else to say it. I mean, so many lives have been touched, so many lives have been destroyed. And all of these things seem to blatantly keep going on right in front of the public eye, and everybody just keeps turning their head. And it's just amazing to me how this has happened. You wrote the Poison Patriarch, that book there. Now tell us a little bit about that book and why you wrote that.
Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to go back one book before that, because nothing would have happened with the Poison Patriarch and then the Reporting Too Much and now the new book, Denial of Justice, if it hadn't been for a book called Melvin Belli, King of the Courtroom. And Melvin Belli, for those people who don't recall, was a flamboyant San Francisco attorney, a tort lawyer, represented the Rolling Stones and Muhammad Ali. He was a big deal in the mid-20th century. And I knew him because I practiced law a bit in his building, and we got to be friends. And in fact, he took me to the Major League Baseball All-Star game and all of that. And when Belli died, in 1996, I decided I wanted to write a biography about him.
Mm-hmm.
And so I began researching Mr. Belli's life. I knew about his legal career, but I didn't know the other side of the story, kind of the dark story about Belli, and that was, first of all, his affiliation and his affection with the mafia. Belli liked to have people believe that he was a member of the mafia. One of his main clients was Mickey Cohen, the Los Angeles gangster. Belli liked to go to Las Vegas and gamble a great deal and wear the black clothes and all of that. So I learned a lot about Belli that way, and during my research for that biography, I ran into a doctor friend of his in San Diego, and we started talking about Belli's habits and all of these things. And he said, "Well, he knew a woman named Dorothy Kilgallen." And I said, "What?" I said, "You mean the star of What's My Line, that quiz show, that television show?" He said, "Oh, Mr. Shaw, you don't know anything about her. She was a investigative reporter who covered high-profile trials like the Dr. Sam Sheppard case, which became The Fugitive, Lindbergh baby kidnapping, all of that. She had a syndicated column to 200 newspapers across the country. She had a radio show that was listened to by 1 million people. And she covered the Jack Ruby trial, and that's where Belli knew her from." And I said, "Really?" He said, this doctor said, "Yeah, and I want to tell you what he said. It's interesting. When she died, he said, 'They've killed Dorothy. Now they'll go after Jack Ruby. They've killed Dorothy Kilgallen. Now they'll go after Jack Ruby.'" So it was that comment, Cisco, that really intrigued me and made me curious. And I wanted to know then more about Belli's affiliation with the mafia and his representation of Jack Ruby at Jack Ruby's trial and all of that. And that's what led to the second book of the four, The Poison Patriarch, because I look at the JFK assassination a lot differently than anyone, I believe, who's ever researched it. I look at it as why Bobby Kennedy was not killed instead of why JFK was. And that changes everything when you look at it from that perspective. Because as the main prosecutor in the Jack Ruby trial told me in an interview, Bobby Kennedy had many more enemies than Jack Kennedy did. So I started looking into that, and it took me back to the 1960 presidential election. And your listeners may remember, hopefully they will, or they've read about it, that in 1960, Richard Nixon was going to be president of the United States, and instead of JFK, unless JFK carried Illinois and West Virginia, the way the electoral votes worked and everything like that. And so Joe Kennedy, the patriarch of the family, realized that, and he used some of his contacts through Frank Sinatra to solicit help from various underworld characters, Sam Giancana, Santo Trafficante, and Carlos Marcello, some of those. And he was able to get them to help win those two states, especially Illinois, where Mayor Daley was king, and Giancana set all that up for more votes and phantom votes and all of that. So the mafia helped JFK become president, and Joe Kennedy had promised that if they did that, then when the new administration was in office, they would leave those guys alone. Well, I had a witness in the Poison Patriarch, as you may remember, who was right there the evening that Joe Kennedy forced JFK. Joe Kennedy forced JFK to appoint Bobby Kennedy Attorney General. And Bobby predictably then went after those guys, especially Giancana and Marcello in New Orleans and all of them. He basically, Joe had double-crossed the mafia. Well, we can't do that.
Absolutely not. And he even
he did.
tried to get get them to get the unions and all that stuff. And when you make a promise like that, there was a handshake, there was an understanding, and they did what they said they were going to do, and he absolutely double-crossed them. And Bobby was like a dog with a bone.
Oh, absolutely.
He didn't even wait.
I want to tell you just a quick story because I think you would be interested in it.
Sure.
When I was a correspondent for Good Morning America, I was asked to interview a lawyer for a Philadelphia Don, a really big mafia guy in Philadelphia. Can't think of his name right now, but anyway, I went over to. They sent me to Philadelphia, and I sat down with this guy, and I interviewed him, Cisco, and the lawyer gave us material that we just couldn't believe he'd said. The mafia, anybody associated, they're supposed to keep their mouth shut. Well,
Right.
they took the tapes back to New York City, and the host on GMA played that the next day, and it was just a huge hit because people couldn't believe what this lawyer had said. So the producer said to me, Mark, can you talk to him again and see what else he'll tell us? And I said, well, sure. So I called the guy's office in Philadelphia because they were interested in the mafia getting into Atlantic City. That's what it was all about. And so I called this guy's office, and his secretary apparently answered, and I said, well, is Mr. Blank, whatever his name was, there? I'd like to talk to him. This is Mark Shaw from Good Morning America. And it was a big silence, and then I could tell that she was crying. And she came back on the phone, and she said, oh, Mr. Shaw, I guess you don't know. He was in his car this morning, and it was blown up.
Yep.
And that's what they do.
You keep your mouth shut. It's an
right.
honor.
And when Bobby Kennedy then deported Carlos Marcello to Guatemala, and then Marcello got back in, he tried to deport him again and charged him with racketeering. You can't mess around with those guys. And so Marcello, as I said in The Poison Patriarch, based on Joe Kennedy's actions, he ended up, if he wanted to kill Bobby, if you kill Bobby, then JFK comes after you with everything the government has. But if you kill JFK, Bobby Kennedy is powerless.
Can do nothing.
And that's exactly what happened.
Can do nothing. Yeah. And now you said it very quickly, and I'm, don't get me wrong. I don't have any affection for, somebody who's going to be a criminal and, be the way they are. Don't get me wrong on that. But I can tell you this, that if you're in that, that's the main thing. You keep your word, you keep your mouth shut, and you do what you're told. You got to watch your back because your best friend might put you out. But, and that's just the way it is. It's a terrible life. I can't imagine. But when they shook hands with you and you made a deal with them, as obviously they did with Joe. And Joe he was no, I don't know if people realize this, what a real scourge he was. I mean, this guy, you want to talk about some dirty dealings and some nasty things. Pardon my language, he'd screw over anybody quick, know, and that's just the way he was. And, what, I don't know what Bobby had for Marcello before. I don't know what got him so dug into that, but when he was deported, explain that a little bit, because they don't realize what you mean by that.
Yeah, it goes back to the McClellan Committee, which was a racketeering committee that looked into the mafia, and Bobby Kennedy was the counsel for that. Jack Kennedy was on that committee too, but it was Bobby who did the questioning, and he made fun of Giancana, Marcello. They all took the Fifth Amendment. He made fun of them and everything, and so those guys didn't forget that.
Right.
And then Joe Kennedy, goes ahead and appoints, has JFK appoint Bobby Attorney General. Then they go after Marcello again, and Marcello will come all the way around into the Reporter Who Knew Too Much and the Denial of Justice. But you have to understand, who was it? Nick Pileggi, who wrote Wise Guy, which became the movie and all of that. He told me, Sicilians like Marcello and those Italians coming from dangerous rootings in Italy, they're all about revenge.
Yeah.
And boy, you cross those people, and you better realize they are going to retaliate.
Absolutely.
And they're in the Poison Patriarch. You may remember that when Joe Kennedy learned that JFK had been murdered, he swept a newspaper across the bed. He was incapacitated at the time with his stroke, but he knew exactly what happened.
Sure. And
he knew that he was responsible. His actions and Bobby's were responsible for JFK's death. And there have been many people who have now said that, Bobby Kennedy knew that it was, Carlos Marcello who masterminded JFK's assassination. Just recently, it was Bobby Kennedy's son who said that in a publicized press conference. So, there's no question that it all comes around, and when you do something that is offensive to dangerous people like that, it's going to come right back at you, as you said.
Absolutely. And I think in some cases we're starting to realize that I don't I honestly I can sit back and I know it sounds silly, but I just don't know how his wife put up with it. You know, I mean she knew. And I mean didn't even have his own daughter. Wasn't she he sent her away and she wound up being lobotomized or something because she didn't fit in and she was too joyous. I mean, the stuff he would do is amazing. So the fact that he would go against um,
Hmm.
you know, a pledge or an agreement or whatever you want to say with the mob, he didn't think anything of it. He looked at it like he needed him, he was done with him, boom, and he got. I'm telling
Well,
you,
I'm glad you've talked about Joe because it all goes back to
it
him, and
does.
people may not realize, and you may remember from the Poison Patriarch that I said Joe Kennedy wanted to be president,
Sure he did.
and he had the power and he had the money, but he made a mistake. He was ambassador to Great Britain, and he was affectionate toward Hitler, Adolf Hitler,
Mm-hmm.
and appeased Hitler and made
Yep.
nice comments about him and all of that. So that ruined the reputation. So when he came back to the United States, he thought, well, I can't be president. If I can't be president, my son is going to be president. Joe Kennedy Jr., unfortunately, was killed in the war.
Yep.
So next up was Jack Kennedy.
Yep.
But I've said this, and some people have disagreed, but I believe it's credible to say this. Joe Kennedy envisioned a dynasty.
Yes.
JFK as president for 8 years, Bobby Kennedy president for 8 years, Edward Kennedy then president for 8 years, and on and on and on. He believed that could happen. He
Mm-hmm.
had the money, he had the power, and if he had probably not tried to play the big shot and show those mafioso that he was a bigger chief than they were, and appointed Bobby Attorney General, some of that may have happened. I think Jack Kennedy would have gotten reelected and probably would have spent 8 years in the White House if Bobby would have behaved himself. They all had the Kennedy charisma and they had the money, they had the power. That could have very well happened. But Joe Kennedy made a major mistake, and as far as I'm concerned, he's responsible for the death of John F. Kennedy.
Well, I agree, and I always thought that, and I was thought it was kind of refreshing when you came out with that. I mean, I've heard it sprinkled
Hmm.
throughout. Like I said in the
Hmm.
beginning, many people just get so bogged down with
Hmm.
misinformation and this and that, and I'm shocked at what people believe. You know, when they see it now. If you look at the news now, somebody will put up a picture of somebody and say man accused of such and such. Well, you can't unring that bell once they've said it, you know, and you find somebody talking about a week ago, the man could have already been found out not guilty, but they're still going to
Sure,
remember that. And
sure.
things really haven't changed. And back in the time when you look in the 60s, you know how it was, things were they were absolutely different. You
Hmm.
know, people looked up like many of these cases throughout, say, witnesses of the shooting.
Hmm.
You'll hear, well, a man came up, said he was with the FBI, and he wanted my camera, and I did my duty, and I gave it to him. I'm gonna
Sure, sure.
do what I have to do. I mean, it was just things were just different when they said it on the TV. That was it. It would nobody even questioned it. You know.
Yeah, we were talking about Walter Cronkite the other day.
Yes.
Somebody asked me, people have said to me, we can talk about Dorothy Kilgallen in a minute here, but people have said, well, we wish we had reporters like Dorothy Kilgallen, or we had
Mhm.
anchors like Walter Cronkite or David
Mhm.
Brinkley or some of those people, because today we don't have those credible individuals where you can just hear what they're going to say and give you the facts, and there's no politics involved
Right.
in the answer what
Mhm.
they're telling us. And so unfortunately we've lost that.
Mhm.
And it's been interesting to me, and we can talk about this just a little bit later, but you just mentioned that all this kind of goes by people a bit
Mhm.
these days. And as you know, in the new book, I've exposed what I believe are the most important JFK assassination documents in history,
Yes.
and we'll talk about exactly what they are. But there's been no uproar. There's been no
Uh huh.
big headline of my goodness sakes, this material proves that there was a plot to kill the president. There doesn't seem to be the shock.
Mhm.
Now, individuals have told me that they're shocked by it, and others. But getting the media to
Mhm.
pay attention to things like this that are so important historically
Mhm.
is very difficult for whatever reason, and that's a shame because we have to pay attention
Hmm.
anytime there's government corruption, and obviously what there was with the JFK assassination.
Hmm. Widespread, by the
Mm.
way. And people say that all the time to poo-poo it. I was just listening to the, and I know we're jumping around and I apologize, but as we come on these things, I love to
Hmm.
let the listeners know. I was listening to Mark Sinclair, for probably the fifth time, listening to his videos because I think they need to be heard. And we'll explain who he is in a moment. But he was listening to Pataki talking about, I forget the book that was written earlier, what, 20 some years ago, about it. And he said, well, in order to believe this, I would have had to believe that the entire, New York police department was corrupt,
Oh
and,
yes.
this was all corrupt and everything else. And I'm like, well, hold on a minute. You know, why is that so hard to believe? I mean, you don't have to have the whole department. All you have to do is have 5 or 6 in the near circle,
Right.
and
Right.
those right there. If they don't want to go along with it, they're going to go along with it because they don't want to be the one that says they're not, because it's going to happen to them too. So they have to go along with it. They're stuck. You
Hmm.
know, and
Yeah. Good
these
point.
the times that this happened, it was so much easier for
Hmm.
them to get away with this, and just cover it up and push it down and leave it. This is what happened. Keep your mouth shut,
Yeah.
and move on. And when you have things compartmentalized like that, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. You do what you're told.
Hmm.
That's plain and
Exactly.
simple.
Good point. Good point. Yeah.
you know and I think it doesn't have to be, everything is corrupt and everything. It just has to be the inner circle, and the rest of them go along because they don't know what else to do, or they don't know any different. They
Hmm.
know what they've been told. So it's not that hard to understand something like this can happen.
Hmm.
You look at the whole JFK shooting, that whole thing. I mean, come on now. How ignorant you have to be to look at and go, wait a minute, where was the Dallas Police Department? They were asked to stand down. Well, that's not unusual, is it? You have the president coming through downtown, and all the police they're going in there to find out what the positions are going to be, and they're told by their boss, the sheriff, there, no, you are to stand down. We are no part of this. Just
Yeah.
go
Well,
about
wait.
your
Wait
regular
till we get
business.
to the new book, Denial of Justice, and I'll give you
Crazy.
some information that's never been published before about Jesse Curry, the Dallas Police Department the police chief, and what he did right after
It's
JFK died. So we can talk about that in a little bit if you'd like.
Absolutely. But see, that's the thing though. People don't realize it. They close it down because they just don't want to think about it. It's over, it's done.
Hmm.
What does it have to do with me? And I think that's what happens, Mark. We look at it and go, it was 50 years ago. What difference does it make? Well, it makes a lot of difference because, quite honestly, and I've told this to I got to speak to Jim Mars, which is the first person I ever heard Dorothy Kilgallen's name from.
Hmm.
And, he felt nothing but affection for her. And he absolutely believed what you believe. And, we've lost him this year. But he sat on the show one time and he says, why am I doing this? Nobody's listening. And I had to call in and talk to him. I said, we're listening. I'm
Hmm.
teaching my sons, and they're listening. So it's not in vain, because I honestly believe, Mark, that day our nation hit our knees and we never really got up completely again. Not to
Yeah.
say,
Oh, I like. Well, that's such a good comment. If I may, I think that when people say it was 50 years ago, 55 years ago last week, and all of that, and that's too long ago and everything. But what happens is when there's a cover up, an obstruction of justice, whatever you want to call it, regarding the death of a president of the United States, history then repeats itself as
mm-hmm,
you keep moving on along, and you can catch up with Nixon and the all the crazy stuff that went on in the White House and the Pentagon Papers, and then
mm-hmm,
you can see all the crazy stuff with Snowden, and you can see corruption even in the Clinton administration, and now we have this going on with the new administration.
it's
All of these
always,
things repeat themselves, and if
mm-hmm,
you're not careful and you don't pay attention, and those people who are responsible are not held accountable,
mm-hmm,
then it continues on. So it does what happened 55 years ago does affect
yes,
today the outlook that there is about. Wait a minute, we've got to hold people accountable
mm-hmm,
uh, for for their wrongs, and if we don't, then it will continue to to play itself out because you're not learning from history at all.
Absolutely true.
But it just continues on. And
Mm-hmm.
this is an extreme example, but it happened this week, and it's a completely different venue. But San Francisco 49ers player was arrested again for domestic violence. It's the third time. They finally dropped him from the team. They gave him every chance. He was arrested in Florida for slapping a woman, throwing her smartphone on the floor, doing all that. The same woman he assaulted out here. And what happened the next day, yesterday, the Washington Redskins picked him up as a player.
Mm.
Well, then that just sends a message out there that domestic violence isn't that important.
Yeah.
Or government corruption isn't that important if we
Right.
let it go by, and all of that. We're not learning from history, and it's costing us
Mm-hmm.
in the ways society behaves itself these days.
And for Pete's sakes, I mean, how long ago did George Santayana say, if we do not learn from history, we are destined to repeat it?
There you go. Exactly.
We are destined to repeat it, and it's repeating itself. And I'll tell you something. The word journalism, the word journalist, I mean, it's thrown around a lot, but it rarely hits home.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the word hero. You hear it all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and it
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't mean what it used to mean. And there was a young lady who pulled herself up by her bootstraps, decided in a time where women were supposed to be home, cleaning and raising the kids and cooking dinner and doing it all with makeup and full dress and jewelry and high heels. And by God, you better do it, and that's what you were meant to do. And this woman chose a different path.
It's a good segue into
And
Dorothy.
she followed,
Yes.
as she was wonderful. She really was. I've got goosebumps just thinking about it. I really do. She broke the glass ceiling when we didn't even know what the glass ceiling was. And she was a journalist. And ladies and gentlemen, what a journalist does is they find out the facts. They investigate. There's a word. They investigate the facts.
Mm-hmm.
Then they investigate them again. They get sources. And there used to be a thing when I was young, and it was told a journalist would almost go to jail before they would give up their sources. It was known as a code of honor,
Mm-hmm.
And this woman had it all. She had it in spades, and she I think she didn't complete college, but she decided her father. Tell us a little bit about her father. He was a
Yeah.
writer
Well,
for where?
right. Well, who we're talking about is Dorothy Kilgallen,
That's her.
and she was most famous for being on the quiz show "What's My Line." It was a panelist show on CBS every Sunday night at 10:30, live show. She was the star. She was kind of a prosecutor-like person as they tried to guess the occupations of regular people. The guy swallowed swords for a living,
Yes.
or he had a wax museum, or he was a women's football writer, which was a big deal. And so you can watch those shows up on YouTube, and you can see Dorothy in action. But the other part of her life, she was a college dropout. She never even made it through the first semester of college. And that was because of the influence by her father, Jim Kilgallen. He was a remarkable reporter. The family was born in Chicago, but with roots back to Ireland. And in fact, in the new book, Denial of Justice, I have a photograph of Dorothy's great-grandparents and the Kilgallen house in Ireland. But Jim Kilgallen was very well respected. He was a man of the truth, just like you're talking about what journalists should be. Went out and got the facts and then presented those in an objective way for people to make up their own mind. But Dorothy fell in love with the newspaper business. And one fall, just as she was getting into college, her dad talked the editor at the New York Journal American, which was a big paper at the time, to giving her an internship. And she came in there, and boy, she just took off.
Right.
And she spent her time writing stories, rewriting stories, learning it. She didn't have any training. Like you said, she had the gender obstacles to overcome and all
Yes.
of that. And Dorothy became a true media icon. Two of my favorite photographs of Dorothy that were in the one was in the Reporter Who Knew Too Much, and the next one is in the Denial of Justice book that just came out. in the reporter of it who knew too much, you show the celebrity status, and you saw this picture on the DorothyKilgallenStory.org. She's standing in the middle of the courtroom at the Dr. Sam Sheppard case, which became the Fugitive movie, and all the other reporters are surrounding her.
Mm-hmm.
They're watching her. They're listening to her. She had the respect of all those people at that trial. And about the same time, there's a photograph in the new book of Dorothy with the legendary actress Betty Davis at Warner Brothers. And that is just 4 years after Dorothy was a college dropout.
Mm-hmm.
You have to think how quickly she ascended to stardom
and
became what the New York Post said was the most powerful female voice in America.
Absolutely.
That's how big she was.
And it was hard, Mark. I mean, we have to emphasize the fact to the listeners, it wasn't like today. Today it's hard. I mean, I was in the Army. I was in one of the first all-female companies in Fort Dix, and that was in the 80s. And they were treating females then like they didn't know what to do with us. They just kept thinking that they'll never be able to pass the stuff we're giving them. And then we kept passing it, and they kept moving. They kept moving the bar. And I can't imagine. And I watched my own mother in the 60s be a single mother and have to go to work and do things, 20, 30 times better just to get half of the recognition. So I understand the time that she was doing this in. It was miraculous what she did. And she did it with grace, and she did it with honor, and she did it with style. And, you can say that she was a panelist on What's My Line, and, other ones were there, but boy, you can watch her do it. The way she asked her questions. I mean, some of these people she'd get in 5 questions, and I mean the most obscure occupations. She was, I want to say she was a pit bull, but that doesn't give a very good visual. She was very much, like you said, a prosecutor. She also wrote what some people call like a social column, who's in the now, what's going on Broadway, who's in what movies, what star is in town, what's going on.
Right.
She wrote that. And then I can almost imagine her sitting there just hungering for the good stuff, the meaty stuff. Give me something harder. And I think that's what drove her to some of these crime the trials. And I think they probably let her in at first thinking, oh, what is she going to do with it? And she kept surprising them because she was good. She was good.
Yeah,
she was fantastic with her wording. Like you call her, she was a wordsmith. I mean,
I'm just going to mention that, yeah.
She was articulate. She was smart, and she wasn't afraid to be a heavy hitter.
Yeah.
The way she tore apart who was it, the wife of the visiting Russian, she tore her
Jeff's wife.
Yeah, but who
bad
else?
Dresser. She was a bad dresser.
Yeah, but she did it very articulately, and she did it in a way. I think at the time she probably thought she was going to lose her job because it stirred up quite a mess. But she just kept going, So when she went into cases like the Sam Sheppard case, or stuck up for Lenny Bruce, and
Lenny Bruce,
yep, and because he was in there for profanity and some other stuff, and she stuck up for these people. She did amazing things. Tell them what she did in the Sam Sheppard case. I found that amazing with the judge. Do you mind?
It's interesting because what you were trying to put a label on Dorothy isn't the easiest thing to do. But
not easy.
As you know, the reporter knew too much. I was very blessed to become a bestseller, and the movie rights were optioned. And the other day, I was talking to one of the producers of the film, and he said, we decided Dorothy was feisty.
Yes, she was.
She was feisty. And I said, well, that's a good word for her. I'm not sure that encapsulates everything about her, but she was feisty, and she was very persistent, and she would, Bennett Cerf, who was a panelist on What's My Line, said after she died that Dorothy, when she went after a story, I mean, there was no backing down. She just kept after it. And with the Dr. Sam Sheppard case, Dorothy, and we'll find out with the JFK assassination, everybody was going one direction, Oswald alone, and Dorothy was going the other direction. Well, the same thing in this Dr. Sam Sheppard case. People may remember, because it was the one-armed man part of the Fugitive movie that was made, David Jansen first and then Harrison Ford. And, that was a huge trial at the time. in Ohio, and Dorothy attended, and she listened to all the evidence. And later many people said she was more of a trial lawyer than trial lawyers were at the time. But she analyzed the evidence and listened to it and decided, hey, after Sheppard was convicted, that that made no sense. And she really, a strong column, and she was shocked and all of that. And then later on, to show the power that she had, she was instrumental. She actually saved Dr. Sam Sheppard's life because he was convicted and sentenced to death. And it was about a year after, when the judge in the trial died, Dorothy thought she could, share the information she had learned when she met that judge at the trial. And she went to F. Lee Bailey, who was Sheppard's appellate counsel, and told him that when she got to the trial, the judge asked to meet with her because of her celebrity status. And then he said, "Why are you here?" And she said, "Well, it's a big murder trial. It's very juicy and all that." And he said, "Well, Sheppard's guilty, guilty as hell. I don't know why you're here." And so she gave that information to F. Lee Bailey. They put it in the appeal. And he says, and I practiced law with Mr. Bailey for a while, he will say for sure that Dorothy Kilgallen's, her presence and her reputation and all of that saved Dr. Sam Sheppard's life. And later on there was another trial of Sheppard, and he was acquitted on DNA evidence, which means an innocent man would have been killed if it hadn't been for Dorothy Kilgallen.
Absolutely. And on top of that, she even waited, the judge passed. Did he not?
Right.
And that's
a woman of integrity, yes.
This is what I'm saying. So she figured, I'm guessing, speculating here, that once he passed, she said, okay, well, no harm done. I've got to take my information and go try to save Sam Sheppard on this, because, she wasn't going to tell even something like that was told to her in confidence.
And, in just a little time that we've talked, I can tell you're that kind of person as well. I think you have the kind of integrity that Dorothy has had, because, and we're going to find out later when when we deal with the JFK assassination, that once again she showed that she was not about to reveal any sources she had for information at all.
Absolutely
and
not.
That integrity is why so many people have said to me, "Boy, we wish we had reporters like Dorothy now."
Well, this is also, I'm saying, wouldn't you just love to? You could go through 200 or 300 of them and not hit one. I mean, it's just, and again, I can't emphasize the fact, I'm sitting here looking at a date right now. This is in the 60s. And I know it's hard for younger, listeners to understand how hard it was for women to achieve these kind of things. Of course, there were people that did things, but it wasn't easy. And she did it with grace, and she did it, oh gosh, her intelligence was amazing. If you just watch some of those shows on What's My Line, but she was also, she knew what the readers wanted. She knew what the public wanted. I don't know if we mentioned too that she also had a radio show in the morning done from her home. With her husband, which was just, I forget what it was called off the top of my head, but
Dorothy and Dick.
Dorothy and Dick. And it was from their home, and she was just lovely the way she did it. And she said, I'm sure the listeners would love to know what my guest is wearing today, because back then everything was about the outfits you were wearing, and that's what they did on What's My Line too. They dressed to the nines. They wore the best jewelry, and that was the whole deal. You had to present yourself formal. That's the kind of world it was. And she also had to surround herself with these people. You don't get up in the morning and look like that. You have to, when you're a social person, you have to be dressed. You have to have your hair done. You have to have your makeup done. And that's why one of her friends, her confidant, was Mark Sinclair, and that was one of her hairdressers. Yeah, exactly. He wasn't just a hairdresser. He was a friend. And
one of her two closest friends.
Yes, exactly. And I can remember back when, again, going back to the time, everybody said only your hairdresser knows for sure. And that was, do you know what I'm talking about? That was that kind of double entendre there that had, well, yes, he knows for sure whether you're dyeing your hair or not, but he also knows your innermost secrets, because that's when you talk. That's when you let it all down.
Him. Yeah, trusted him, yeah.
And that's absolutely what I thought about when I thought, when we started to see Mark. Now, tell the listeners where they can see some of this. This is on the DorothyKilgallen.org, is it not?
It is, and just going back for a minute, when you talk about the radio show, there's a great photograph that's never been seen in the new book, Denial of Justice, and it's the family sitting around the kitchen table on the radio, and you have Dorothy, of course, her husband Richard Calmer, Jill and Carrie, the two youngest children, their parrot, and the butler, James Clement, is also around there.
Oh, he's in there. Okay.
So all those people are around the table. I'm not sure if James is in that one, but they're all there. And that show was listened to by 1 million people every day in New York City. It was a huge hit on WOR. And when you then those kinds of things, and the photographs and different things about Dorothy, all of the quotes about her and the interviews, and her columns about the JFK assassination, which we'll talk about, are all up on the DorothyKilgallenStory.org. And so many people have gone there. We have many images in the Reporter Who Knew Too Much, but I've got about 40 new images in the new book, Denial of Justice, and I can tell you why I ended up writing that new book. But we want people to be able to go to a certain site and see Dorothy in action. And then, of course, you can go into YouTube and you can watch all the shows.
Right.
And it's amazing. It was such an intelligent type of a quiz show.
It was.
And I'll tell you, Dorothy was on the ball. She had a real knack for just taking a question or two and figuring out what the occupation was. And that's the same sort of acumen she used in the courtroom.
Because watching that, not to cut you off, Mark, but I think it's important. People watching that can actually see a lot of her personality. You can watch her body language and see when she's got it, and she'll ask a question, but she already knows it. She's just confirming what she already knows. You can kind of see it in her. And even the other panelists that were with her, and because there was guest panelists too, they weren't always the same. They had nothing but affection for her, and they looked up to her in that way, and they knew most of the time she was going to get it, and they were kind of trying to beat her at the game, but it was hard. And you can kind of see that, and you can imagine that same woman sitting in the front row of a criminal trial doing the same doggone thing she was doing on that show.
Yeah, one of the interesting things is, I think it was the Dr. Sam Sheppard case. Dorothy had written and she was such a good wordsmith, of course, and she had written about that in a column, and it almost had to do with how she felt like that the defense had not used the proper language and whatever to defend Sheppard, and it was in a column, and then the next day she listened to the final argument by Sheppard's lawyer, and it almost was exactly what she had written. So
she was looked up to by a lot of people. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and she was sharp that way, and I think she would have made an awful good courtroom lawyer. That's for sure.
Yeah, I believe so too. And
let me just tell you one anecdote there that you'll love. In the new book, In Denial of Justice, that came out on the 20th. There's a interview with a New York radio host that I don't think has ever been published before. I had somebody at Syracuse University found it for me in their archives, and this host has on Richard Calmer, who was Dorothy's husband, and we can talk about the problems with that marriage and his alcoholism and everything, but he's on the air, and he's talking about Dorothy and how much she loved to go to trials, and she would be so frustrated with the prosecutor and the defense attorney and everything, and he said, and she can't even watch Perry Mason because she gets so upset that she starts throwing things at the screen because she knows they're not factual, and that couldn't have happened, and all of that. So she was such a stickler for the truth.
She was
that even a show like that bothered her.
And for justice, Mark. And that's the thing that gets me, because you can go through these columns, and I've tried to read some of them, and the way she picked apart, like you're saying, and rightfully so. I mean, I kind of do the same thing when I'm watching a show. I'm like, what do you do? That's ridiculous. And they've lost me already because they're trying to pull the wool over our eyes or something. And she would do the same thing. And one of the most famous cases she did on that was Marilyn Monroe. And that one kind of broke my heart a little because I really think there was more to that. I don't know if you've looked at it the same way, but it almost seemed like she was pushed to kind of do it. And then a couple of days later, Marilyn Monroe is dead because she wrote the article about somebody, I think she was talking about Bobby. Other people thought she was talking about JFK's having an affair basically with Marilyn Monroe. And then a couple of days later, Marilyn is dead. And I don't know whether that was done to try to give a reason. I don't know. There's something very sticky going on there. I don't like it. It's not adding up here. It's just too convenient. And on the same token, she's writing this and she's going over the crime scene. And she's saying, okay, this doesn't add up. Why was Marilyn's door locked if she just wanted to go to sleep? She never locked her door. Why was her bedroom so messy and her house so messy? If this was her housekeeper, why wasn't she doing her job? Everything just didn't add up to her. And it didn't add up to me either, or many other people that have, read about the Marilyn Monroe supposed suicide. And another thing that got me, she said, why was the light on? If you're trying to go to sleep, don't most people go to sleep better in the dark? Why was her light left on if she was trying to go to sleep? And Dorothy's light was left on when they found her.
Well, the thing with Dorothy was that, and this is something that I was able to notice more and more, and you certainly have as well. My background as a criminal defense lawyer, you always look for the little things in a case that didn't fit, the parts of the puzzle that didn't fit. And you just mentioned 3 or 4 things with Marilyn's death that many other people may have overlooked or whatever, but Dorothy was looking for those little things that didn't make sense, and she'll do that with the JFK assassination. We talk about that in a little bit.
Absolutely.
She was always she was very curious, and if something didn't make sense, then she didn't forget about it. She went ahead and really looked into it. I think the frustration that Dorothy had frustration though over Marilyn Monroe's death, and I'll tell you why. Many people have asked me, is there a connection between Dorothy and Marilyn's death? Well, certainly there's a connection between the two women. They were friends, although in the new book I have some comments by Marilyn about Dorothy that aren't as nice as people would think, but they were friends. They both had an obsession about UFOs that they shared with JFK. That's in the new book as well.
True, yes.
So there were connections between them, but I've never been able to connect the two deaths. And I truly feel that Dorothy was frustrated by Marilyn's death, and here's why. In Dorothy's death, you can look at substantial primary source evidence that isn't complicated. Dorothy was found, and we can talk about how this happened, but she was found in a bedroom she didn't sleep in.
Yes.
In a bed she never slept in, with her makeup, eyelashes, and hairpiece on, didn't have the same clothes she wore to bed. There wasn't the crime scene itself had been kept pretty much intact. The problem with Marilyn's death, and I think this frustrated Dorothy, was that when they got there, so many people traipsed through that bedroom.
Yes.
The whole thing was a mess. They moved things. They moved Marilyn. They moved drugs. They did all these things, and so it became a contaminated death scene, and that was why it was so difficult for the police when they actually finally investigated to come to too many conclusions that way. And that would have frustrated somebody like Dorothy, because it was tough for her then to look into that case and come up with any conclusions that she thought were worthy.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest things that bothered her is, why did the first doctor have to summon a second doctor to find out that Marilyn was dead? What kind of a doctor was he? They didn't know she was dead?
Nobody over there and controlled everything. No.
Yeah, well, that's just it. And all these things didn't add up to her, and they still don't add up to us all these years later, and that was with Marilyn. Now, I think it's important for the listeners to know a little bit we know about her professional life, and even the fact we didn't even mention that she had her hand in some movies and even was in one. I mean, she was doing so many things that she could possibly do. Now, all while being a fantastic mother. She cared and loved her children greatly. She was terrific at that. And she met Richard Colmar. Now, was he not a producer of plays and things? So you have to remember, she lived in Manhattan in New York, and it was just a booming town at the time, and so many things happening. And they got together, and he was fairly good at what he was doing. He was making it at the time, and then he kind of fell on hard times, did he not? The plays weren't doing so well, and he was losing track. Now you think about this as a kind of what I call the Ricky and Lucy syndrome. Lucille Ball was so, you know where I'm going, right? Lucille Ball was just, fantastic, and she was doing all these things too, and around the same time Dorothy was, and she was producer, and she was the hit of the show, and she was helping write the show and all the slapstick and the humor, and then she was just this fantastic glamorous woman, and and mother too. And Ricky kind of lost it because he was tired of being Mr. Lucille Ball, and I've kind of got the same feeling that Richard Colmar was feeling the same.
Yeah.
Well,
there's in my books, I have warts and all. I don't only show one side of the subject that I'm speaking about, whoever it's been. And with Dorothy, there was a side to her that people needed to know about. She was this remarkable woman, this TV icon. What she achieved was absolutely amazing in her profession. But her private life was a mess.
Yes.
She had the 3 kids. And she was married to Richard Colmar. He was a successful Broadway producer when she met him. But he got tired, just like you said Desi did. He got tired of being Mr. Kilgallen because she was such a huge star.
Yes.
That he didn't feel comfortable in that role, and it led to a lot of disagreements, one of which was how to bring up the children and things like that. But more than that, Richard finally had some losing shows on Broadway. He tried a couple of restaurants. We deal with that in Denial of Justice, especially.
Yeah, and they failed.
And he really lost it. And all at once, of course, Dorothy's the only moneymaker in the family, and that can cause a problem too. And so he was discouraged. And unfortunately, he took that out by hitting the bottle and became an alcoholic, pretty much, running around with women after women after women, and men too.
Men too, yeah.
And so they were estranged, and Dorothy's lonely, and the first person that she ended up with was a singer that people may remember, Johnny Ray. The Little White Cloud That Cried was supposed to be a homosexual, but obviously he was a bisexual because they had a torrid love affair.
Yes, they did. And I think he really loved her.
Oh, no question about it. He really did.
Do.
He was much younger than she was, but they had a torrid love affair, and I wrestled with how much of that to put in The Reporter Who Knew Too Much, and even in the new book, because, those are personal things, but people will learn that this was the first of the 2 affairs that she had, and we'll talk about Ron Pataki later, but with Johnny Ray, I was able to prove through Mark Sinclair, his videotaped interview at the DorothyKilgallenStory.org, and then in the new book by Dorothy's butler's daughter, that there is no question that Carrie, the youngest son of Dorothy, the birth father was not her husband Richard, but Johnny Ray.
And I honestly, just to interject here really quick, I honestly believe that they had that kind of relationship with, like you could just imagine the talk. Okay, look, Richard, you've got you're running around. I've got mine. She probably wasn't even thinking that. It was just, we've got to keep up appearances. We have this big, 5-story mansion that they lived in. Okay, they've got to keep up appearances. Everything is very social. They still have the show. We have to appear. And this is what everybody did back in that time. You just appear for the public one way, and we'll keep our stuff behind closed doors. And even though they were both seeing other people, and again, I don't think she saw as many as he did. I think he was just running through them like water. I think she was just very work driven and really kept up her appearances a little bit more.
Only 2 affairs, I think. 2 affairs,
but
still, she was public with it. I mean, she pranced around Broadway with Johnny Ray and made out with him at some of the restaurants. And things like
they had
that.
something going on.
Richard is doing that as well with some of the women that were in his Broadway shows.
And still, you get back on that show and the next morning and act like everything is just fine, and that's just the way things were back then.
That was unfortunate.
I do agree that the son was probably his, because even, people saw similarities in their faces and stuff like that.
Oh,
But
yeah, no question
but the
about it.
only reason that that's really important at this point is the fact that Dorothy felt very beholden to Richard. And many times throughout the books and the interviews, you'll hear that Dorothy would never leave Richard
Hmm.
because he was so very kind to her. And they must have had just some kind of honor pact, and this is the way it was. She would never leave him, she would never divorce him. She was very and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm just trying to throw in some stuff that's important for later, that she was very worried about how Carrie would be brought up and everything else. So we're going to tell you right now, folks, suicide was out of the question. This was not the kind of woman that would commit suicide. There was no reason for her to do it. So please don't believe that blather that, she would have had committed
No.
suicide, because she would have never left that child.
No, but with Richard, you have to remember one thing that's important, because both The Reporter Who Knew Too Much and Denial of Justice, the new book, they're crime murder mysteries. So you've got several suspects.
Right.
And we can talk about Frank Sinatra in a minute. And you've got Richard Calmer, and you've got J. Edgar Hoover, and you've got Carlos Marcello, and you've got
Right.
this Ron Pataki we'll talk about. But Richard showed his propensity for violence. Maybe you remember that at one point he caught Dorothy and Johnny Ray at the townhouse. I guess you would call it back in that day making out or whatever. And Richard just went berserk and threatened to kill Johnny Ray if they didn't stop it. And she did for a while, and then she ended up going back with Johnny Ray. But Richard had real motive to have eliminated his wife if he wanted to, and so that's why he's one of the suspects in her death in both of the books.
I would say that that's fair, but I have other reasons to believe that, I don't think he could have gone through it. I don't know. I mean, you never know.
Remember, though, just a second. Remember, though, at Dorothy's funeral, and we can talk about
The mom.
what happened leading up to that. Yes, Dorothy's mother said, pointed at Richard and said, "I know you killed my daughter, and I will prove it." So, and there's some new evidence in the new book of Jill, the daughter, having suspicions that way, and what happened after Dorothy's death and all that. So we can't discount. What I say in the book is Richard either could. We're going to show that Dorothy was poisoned with barbiturates. She didn't die accidentally. And
he had some
Richard
of those,
could have
didn't he?
done that either accidentally or accidentally on purpose.
Because he actually had one of the barbiturates in his medicine cabinet, did he not?
He basically had the one that is the strongest, pretty much, of the Tulinol. His son said he had a stash of them. So,
well, it's very possible. I just think that Richard probably would have known that she needed her reading glasses to read, unless he just got so caught up he forgot.
Weren't, as people want to know, those were not at this staged death scene, and of course there was no investigation of her death way back then. We should. People are probably saying, Mark, why Dorothy Kilgallen? How'd you get involved in this? And I told you how I heard first about her, but
from Melvin Belli.
People may think that I'm a little bit loony and the white coat should come, but I want people to know that I felt Dorothy's presence. I felt her wanting me to write her story. She's guided me all along from the hereafter to new evidence and new material about her, and I could have never done this without Dorothy, without her help. And so I think she chose me to write her story and become her voice and bring her back to life and all of that. And a lot of this material we're talking about would have never been possible if she hadn't guided me along to certain information and things like that was important for her story.
Well, first of all, my listeners aren't going to think that's crazy. They're going to think it's wonderful, because we just believe in that way. There's absolutely that. I think it's not only possible, I think it's probable that she did. And it's quite possible that she's doing it. I just can't see Dorothy doing it for her. You know what I mean? Like, maybe she wants to do it just to get her name clear because her kids are still alive. I don't know, but I can see something like that, pushing her forward to do something like that. But she really did, you fell on some of these things that really opened a lot of doors for you that you would have never came across.
Question about it. No question
and
about it.
I think that's just amazing.
I would have never found that Mark Sinclair
it's amazing.
Videotaped interview, or the one with Charles Simpson, the other hairdresser, or the woman on What's My Line that was on the last show, or Joe Tonahill, the co-counsel for Jack Ruby. All those videos are up at the DorothyKilgallenStory.org. I would have never found them if Dorothy hadn't guided me to some people that knew about those videos. There would have been no books about her.
Yeah, and it's just amazing. And it's not the first time I've heard of something like this. So on this show, at the very least, Mark, you can just be honest about that, because I absolutely believe Dorothy sees it. I think she's just proud of you and proud of everybody that's helped you along the way. And for somebody who sought justice for so many people, the fact that she's got none, it just blows my mind. I mean, well, I'm not surprised, but I'm appalled by it. Let's just put it that way. And there were so many involved in this JFK. So we were talking about Richard Colmar, and, quite possibly he could have been. But she did say that she would not divorce him. She would not leave him because he had been so kind to her. So that's a little bit about her home life.
But she was worried about Carrie, remember?
Absolutely.
And she thought that Richard wouldn't take care of Carrie. And that's why it's so logical to believe that she knew he was Johnny Ray's son, and Richard knew it was Johnny Ray's son.
I believe
In fact, right before she died, she was going to change her will so that Carrie would have more, coming to him than the other two children. So, that's really complicated, and we're going to find out when we talk about a little bit more about the new book and the JFK assassination, really what happened to her right before she died.
Right.
But you may not know that Dorothy was more scared in her life by nothing else than the fact that just before she died, Carrie had gone to Central Park to play.
Yes.
And the next day, his photograph was in a newspaper, and that scared her because she knew somebody was following him. And even when Halloween came up a couple of days later, she sent him around in a limousine, for heaven's sake. So
and it was
Carrie
a big
was very
joke.
precious to her. And she loved him, maybe not more than the other two children, but she was going to protect him for sure.
Well,
that's how Dorothy would have been. Yeah. He was the youngest. Yeah, true. That's right. Yeah.
And plus, too, the older ones, was Richard's actual children. So, of course, as a mom, you have to think as a mom. Of course, you're going to protect who you have to protect the most. And I can't imagine that, because that newspaper, there was nothing written under it, nothing else. It was just him. Now, if that isn't a message, Now, the reason she was getting messages, of course, now is because she decided that she was going to cover the Jack Ruby trial. Now, for the listeners who don't, I can't imagine where you've been in a box, but anyway, here we go. John F. Kennedy is shot in Dallas.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, everything that happened around them, we're going to try real hard not to have this spider web. We're going to hang on real tight and make sure we get, because we could go in any direction right now for hours. But basically, everybody is trying to say that Oswald is a single shooter. Now, I'm going to say this, bunk. I never believed it, and many people I know never believed that. That's the most absolutely ridiculous thing, whether you want to talk about multiple shooters, a grassy knoll, the number of bullets. Come on now. But there that is. Jack Ruby, Oswald is arrested, obviously, and held. Okay. Now, here's where Jack Ruby comes in. Jack Ruby, tell us a little bit about Jack Ruby. He owned and operated what?
Right. Okay. Let's make sure, though, that we understand. For Dorothy, the JFK assassination, first of all, was personal, and I'll tell you why in just a second. The second thing is that the reason there is the subtitle to the new book, it's Denial of Justice, Dorothy Kilgallen, Abuse of Power, and the Most Compelling JFK Assassination in History. And the reason it is because unlike me, unlike all the authors, all the so-called experts that have written about the JFK assassination, we weren't there. Dorothy Kilgallen was. She was at the Jack Ruby trial. And the reason she went was personal, and we need to hit that. She took little Carrie, her beloved little son, to the White House, and Pierre Salinger set up a meeting with JFK, and he came in the library, and he just was so kind to Carrie. He looked at the letters that Carrie had brought with his third grade class. He gave him a PT 109 pen. He just was so gracious, and Dorothy never forgot that. And so when JFK died, she looked at, first of all, she was appalled and cried and everything when he did. But when Jack Ruby shot Lee Harvey Oswald, her hair raised on the back of her neck, and she said, something's wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
And she ended up going to Dallas. She first of all talked to Dallas police officers and Jesse Curry, and in the new book there's actually a little autobiography by Jesse Curry where he admits that the first thing he did when he heard the shots was send officers not to the book depository but to the overpass, and Dorothy knew all that.
Mm-hmm.
And so then she sits in the front row as a celebrity journalist at the Jack Ruby trial. She listens to the testimony that we are going to go over in just a minute so that I can tell you the revelations that are so shocking that I found in the Jack Ruby trial transcripts.
They're amazing.
But she listened to all of that, and then she was the only reporter at that trial to interview Jack Ruby. She then exposed his testimony before the Warren Commission. She was all over Jack Ruby because she believed Lee Harvey Oswald was kind of a confusing mess out there, and you're never going to prove all these things about him. But she could focus on Ruby and his actions. And that's what led her to believe, just before she died, that she had everything put together. She had solved the assassination. She was going to put it in a book for Random House, and that's the reason that she was killed. But let's go over that material in the transcripts, if we may.
Absolutely.
Well, you got to set the stage here, and I want people to know the listeners to your show are important to me, as they are to you, and the reason they're important to me, I would have never written either book if I hadn't gotten a lot of tips from listeners and readers of the books, especially the new one. And so anybody out there that listens to this show, if they have information for me, please get in touch with me or you. And that is so important, and I'll tell you why, because there's a lawyer down in Fresno who bought The Reporter Who Knew Too Much, called me and said, I bought it at 5, I read it before I went to bed, and I have something you need to look at. And he told me it was a copy of the Jack Ruby trial transcripts.
Wow.
And he said, Mr. Shaw, I'm going to send those to you, and he did. They were 2,000 pages long. When you stack them up, it's about 1.5 feet. And I started through those, Cisco, and I was just shocked as I did because I found material in there that people need to know about so that they can once and for all realize there was a plot to kill the president. It wasn't Oswald alone. The first one is that there's testimony there from witnesses, credible witness, that Jack Ruby actually watched the assassination take place from the Dallas Morning News offices out a window facing Dealey Plaza. A witness testifies to that. That means he had to know about the assassination before it happened.
Right.
And I have now taken and I don't know if the publisher is very happy or not, but I have taken excerpts from the new book. We have all of the excerpts of the Jack Ruby trial in there, and they are now posted on my website, markshawbooks.com, where everybody can take a look at them. And when they come to this one, they are just going to be shocked beyond belief, because it basically shows it's chapter 15, and it has a witness who owned a parking lot right across from Jack Ruby's Carousel Club that you talked about, the strip joint.
Right.
And the guy testifies, hallmark the fact that Ruby always parked his car there and had done so for 3 years. And then he's asked about Ruby's actions the day before he shot Oswald. And Ruby had come over to use a pay telephone, and this guy says that Ruby was inquiring about when Oswald was going to be transferred. And then he says that he listened, and the next thing that happened, some conversation between Ruby and whoever he was talking to, and the question is, now did Ruby say anything with regard to whether or not he might be there when Oswald was going to be transferred? What did he say about that? And the guy testifies he told the viewer he was talking to that he would be there. He would be there, yes, which means Ruby said, I will be there.
Correct.
Well, this is amazing because, as you know, Ruby always said that he just happened on the Dallas Police Department basement, that he just happened to go inside, that Oswald happened to be there. Not only does he say, I will be there, he admits that he acted like a reporter with a pencil and notebook to get in there, and that he used his friends in the Dallas Police Department to gain access so he could kill Oswald. Well, obviously,
Absolutely.
Dorothy listened to all of that. She knew the connection between Oswald and Ruby, and she knew there was a plot to kill the president. And I would really urge your listeners to go read those transcripts themselves. They can make up their own mind, but Dorothy knew then there was a plot to kill JFK.
Of course she did. I mean, she couldn't even watch Perry Mason without going crazy if they made a mistake. Of course she was going to pick up on that. Who wouldn't? Now, just for the listeners, the Carousel Club, a little bit about Jack Ruby. Jack Ruby was I can get it man. Because he always, I think he never quite got to the stature he wanted to be. I don't think he knew whether he wanted to be a police officer or he wanted to be in the mob or both.
Good.
But he was kind of trying to please both sides, and he just wanted that attention. He liked to gamble. He liked to be in the limelight, just like all these people, wear the suits and be more than he was. He was that kind of guy. And, this Carousel Club, it's become famous now, of course, because of him. But, people went in there. It's a strip club. It was a dingy little strip club. But the guys went in there to be guys and drink and talk and smoke their cigars. And, he wanted to be a part of that. Now, from what I understand, of course, this could be not true, but he owed money. He liked to gamble. He owed about $34,000, which was a lot of money back then. And it's a very good possibility that or some other reason, look, Jack, you go in there and do this, you be one of the guys, whatever, we'll get you out. You'll be in there, you'll be out. You know how they say. He had a lot of connections. He knew most of the police officers that were there in downtown, to the point of when his brother walked through with him, everybody was, hi, Jack, how you doing? He was so impressed.
Good.
He was so impressed because everybody knew Jack. And that was go walking through the Dallas Police Department. So it was not unusual. They knew him. They knew him by sight. That's number one. Number two, he was also the place where he watched through the window, which was right across the street from the school book depository. In the transcripts, the gentleman, the witness, describes the fact that you could see everything, almost the whole building, I believe he says, from where Jack was sitting. And Jack was kind of pretending to write up an advertisement for the club to go in the paper. The guy left. He gives the times. Kennedy was shot at, 12:35?
Something like that.
Yeah, he left the room, and Jack was sitting at that desk. When he came back, Jack was standing at the window watching the whole thing. So maybe he just got up to see the president. Maybe he put himself there because he knew what was going to happen, just happened to be in a room where you got the full view of everything. Jack Ruby knew.
Yeah, he did. He did, and, it's the interesting thing about... when people have asked me, all right, you had the reporter knew too much, very successful, why'd you write the new one? Well, I found new information about Dorothy's death. I found new information about the main suspect in her death. I found the fact that this investigation we'll talk about by the DA last year in New York City was bogus. But I found these incredible documents, the Jack Ruby trial transcripts. Now, you can argue with what you say and what I say and what everybody else wants to say about this. But this is concrete, credible evidence from the trial with sworn witnesses and all of that. And nobody should be able to argue with what's in here because this is solid proof that there was a plot to kill the president. And you talked about Ruby. The first visitor to the jail was one of Carlos Marcello, the Mafia Don's underlings there in Dallas. We've proven in the new book that Melvin Belli, who represented Jack Ruby, obviously knew about the assassination before it took place because I found a witness who, when Belli was told that Oswald was killed, said, now I'll have to represent Jack Ruby. So
he already knew.
Ruby knew about it. Belli knew about it, was on standby. If somebody was going to be arrested, then Ruby could take care of them. And Dorothy just saw this in many ways as a standard mafia hit. What happens? Marcello masterminds the assassination of JFK instead of Bobby. And then Oswald is a loose end because he's captured. So you bring in Ruby to silence Oswald. And then you bring in Melvin Belli as the lawyer who silences Ruby at trial and makes him look crazy. I mean, it was common sense for Dorothy. She knew what had happened, but I could never completely prove all that until these Jack Ruby trials transcripts have been exposed. And again, they're at the markshawbooks.com website. People can read them for themselves, and then they can make up their own
I
mind as to
highly
what happened.
recommend they do. I mean, they're absolutely intriguing, and
History.
yeah, it's history, and most of the people that are witnesses are even, Dallas Police Department. The police officers here.
Oh yeah.
And the fact that he said to the man that overheard him on the phone. Now, I've seen some comments. I can't remember where, but they were about the book, and he said, "Okay, well, Mr. Shaw says this, and he's, Jack Ruby could have meant anything. We said, I'll be there. Well, hold on a minute. You're taking it out of context. You put that back into context, and anybody listening to that conversation would get the same result, because the man is describing how he's going to go in and he's going to make like a reporter, and with a pencil and pad, and that's how he's going to get in. And that's exactly how he did it, because isn't it in the transcripts as well, where the police officer was saying, what is he doing here? He's walking in with these two other reporters with the red badge. Now, people might not realize that when you were in press at that time, you see the old cartoons with the press hat with the tag on the hat that says press. Well, that's how you got into these. You got, now everybody wears the bands around their neck with the little card, but then it had to be real big, because if you had a press tag that allowed you to get into these things, and Oswald was being moved through a base, almost like a parking garage basement thing they were coming through.
Right.
Well, here comes Jack Ruby with a reporter on both sides that both had the red badge on them. And he's all hunched over. He repeated it. He was all hunched over. Yes, he was. He was hunched over, writing on a pad with a pencil, just like he said he would in that conversation. So there it is. That backs up what the other guy said that he overheard on the phone.
Yes, it does.
So they don't need to take that out of context. I'm sorry, I'm a bit.
No, you're right. And the interesting thing, I'll tell you too, there are people out there who have given their life to the JFK assassination, trying to solve it. The bullet, where did it come from? Was the tree in the way so that the shot couldn't have come from
it's so hard,
the book depository? All the medical things about the state of JFK's head and the direction of the bullet and everything. I have complete respect for them, and they've worked very hard at it. As long as they just understand, though, that when you look at the whys involved with JFK assassination, you've got to use some common sense. And,
well, it's all very true.
And that's why these transcripts are so important, because it's just common sense to read them and realize what happened.
Well, you think, too, and the people that worked very hard on those, I mean, I've been watching them for years, and they come through, and I'm going to quote Jim Mars now, garbage in, garbage out. Whatever you put in, you can have the computer come out with anything, but it's what you put in it, and that's common sense as well. And in honesty, Mark, a lot of the ones that have made sense in the past, it all seems to match up anyway. It's just, this is new information that should be put in, so the calculation comes out correct, because like we said in the beginning of this, it splinters all over the place. But when Jack Ruby got in there, I was watching a video too of Melvin Belli. Now, you know him better than I did. You worked with the man, same building. But I'm just going on micro expressions and body language. This man was like a cat, a Cheshire cat, in this video, and supposedly had just come out from speaking to Ruby. And he says, and I'm going to paraphrase here because I can't get it verbatim, but he basically said, well, what did you think, Mr. Belli, when you came out of the, well, he wasn't the man I expected to see. And, he starts talking about that, and he said he seemed very articulate, and he seemed very calm, and he seemed everything. And 2 seconds later, he says, well, it's already been put out that we're going to put him on an insanity plea. Well, that doesn't match up to me. Something was up there. Do you know where I'm going with that? That doesn't make any sense to me. He was just like reading from a script.
Dorothy was very suspicious of Belli, I think, right from the beginning. She
Me too.
knew of him being a blowhard and all of that. And there's a new column in the Denial of Justice book right at the beginning called "Ruby Stars the Last" that Dorothy wrote, that we uncovered actually at the Lincoln Center in New York City, I think. a collection there of Dorothy's things, and it's interesting because it shows the first meeting, or not, and first, I'm sorry, the first view she really had of Jack Ruby from her front row seat at the trial.
Mm-hmm.
And she talks about his shining eyes and
Mm-hmm.
what he looked like and
Mm-hmm.
all this other kind of thing and how he was acting. And you really get a visual of what her perception was of Ruby.
Mm-hmm.
And there's Belli with him and all of that. And I think she, at that particular point, I think she began to feel in some ways sorry for Ruby. I
Mm-hmm.
think she knew that he had been used,
Yes.
that he had been, ordered or
Mm-hmm.
whatever to take care of Oswald,
Mm-hmm.
and now he was being represented by a lawyer who was probably going to throw it like a punch-drunk fighter, to not give Ruby a fair trial, which
Mm-hmm.
Melvin Belli did not do in that
Correct.
particular case. So
Correct.
she felt some sorrow for him.
Mm-hmm.
Then she was able to interview him, and she kept notes of what she found out. And then you have to think about the trail that I mentioned to New Orleans and Marcello, because
Correct.
where did Dorothy go?
Right.
She didn't go to Dallas and look into LBJ, who was certainly a suspect.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't go to Washington, D.C. to look into the CIA or the
Mm-hmm.
military complex or anything. She went to New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
And she had that trip that was very suspicious that Mark Sinclair,
Absolutely.
the hairdresser, described. At one point she says, Mark, go back to New York City. Don't tell anybody you were here and don't ask any more questions. Because
Absolutely.
she really had connected Oswald, Ruby, and Marcello, and she was going to put that in the new book. And as you know then, she told Charles Simpson, if the wrong people knew what I know about the JFK assassination,
Mm-hmm.
would cost me my life. I'm afraid for my life and my family. She bought a gun, and she was dead then a few days after that.
Absolutely. And she only got, just back to the courtroom for a second, if you don't mind. She got Melvin Belli, or actually through, what was his assistant
Joe
attorney?
Tonahill.
Yep.
Joe Tonahill.
Said, look, I just want to talk to Ruby. Will you let me? And he goes and asks Ruby. Now, Ruby probably trusted her because of her stature and because of her fame and because of, who she was. Yes, let me talk to her. Now, she goes in the courtroom, just sits back at the little table right there in front of anybody and talks to him, 3-5 minutes? And in
A little more than that, yeah.
A little more than that. And just in that amount of time, that was it. And she went straight to New Orleans. Now.
Yeah. Now, I will correct you just on one thing. She did interview actually twice. There were two interviews. One was about 6 or 7 minutes. The other was about 8 minutes. And on the DorothyKilgallenStory.org, Tonahill tells how that happened because, as you may remember, there was a mutual friend, an opera singer in San Francisco that Dorothy knew and said to say hello to Ruby and say that she would support him. So that was the connection, and that's how out of 400 reporters, she was the only one to interview Ruby.
That's amazing, yeah. And that was the thing, and we explained a little bit about her life, and we explained how close she was with her hairdresser. Now, you have to understand, like we said in the beginning of this, why would you take your hairdresser? Well, it's like taking your purse to somebody like that. You have to have, she was getting her pictures taken, she was in the limelight, she was, he went with her. He was not only her friend, he was somebody that she needed to get through her day. She had to look good. And, back then, this is just what happened. Mark Sinclair, I think, is an extremely incredible witness. I watched his videos over and over. I've watched his body language. I watched how he talked. Now, Mark kept his mouth shut about all this for years. Even the first book that was really written, there's been several books on Dorothy. None to the extent
of
these.
Just three. There's only been 3. Yeah.
And he kept his mouth shut. And even in the video, he says, I didn't want any part of it. Why? I was scared for my life. I was scared to death. I was scared.
Right.
Petrified, I think he said. Yeah. So that was the thing. Now, when she went to New Orleans, she took a different plane, a different hotel. He took a different plane, a different hotel. I'm sure she paid for it. But they went and had lunch. Something like that. He went around, he did some shopping. He gets back to the hotel. He calls her, she calls him, whatever. And the phone call was, get back on a plane, go back to New York. Don't tell anybody you were here. Don't tell anybody you were ever in New Orleans or you had anything to do with this. Why? She found out something that scared her to death because she was never the same after that.
No, you've hit it right. You've hit it right on the head. And You know, you have to think of her mindset at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Dorothy believed she was invincible.
Yes.
And she was so big, she was such a big media
Mm-hmm.
icon, nobody could touch her. But she went back to New York and she made a mistake. She started telling everybody,
Yes.
I'm going to crack the case wide open. I've got it,
Mm-hmm.
all figured out.
Mm-hmm.
And she put a target on her back because
She did.
neither Carlos Marcello, who she believed masterminded the assassination, or J. Edgar Hoover, who she had proved had covered up the assassination, they could not let her write that for Random House. There was no question about that. And I do think it's important for me to point out you have Mark Sinclair in The Reporter Who Knew Too Much, and he is so credible
Mm-hmm.
in terms of what he says. But there's another eyewitness who is as credible as Mark is. And in the new book, I show the interview with with Brenda DeJordan, who was Dorothy's butler, James Clement's daughter. And we found her in New York City, and actually my wife went with me, and we interviewed her for about 4 hours, and she gave us such incredible insight into Dorothy's life and times, the parties at the townhouse, because she and her father and mother lived in the townhouse in an apartment downstairs, and so she knew all of this information. But in the new book, she talks about Dorothy's investigation of JFK's death, and what her father said, and how he was scared for her and told her, leave Jack Ruby alone.
Mm-hmm.
These are dangerous people, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
She even talks about the FBI agents swarming the townhouse on the day Dorothy died.
Mm-hmm.
So there's more credible evidence in denial of justice that, Dorothy had been warned by both Mark Sinclair
Mm-hmm.
and James Clement.
Mm-hmm.
You got to stop this. But nothing, like Bennett Cerf said, nothing was going to stop Dorothy.
Mm-hmm.
When she had a story that she was after and an investigation, she was going to take it to the end. And in this situation, it cost her life.
Well, I absolutely agree. And, it's just amazing information. But I'll tell you, I really believe, Mark, that she thought, if, like so many people, if you just get it down on paper, that'll be my protection because nobody will touch me after that because they'll know.
Good.
And I think that's what she really thought. If I just get it down, she held her papers, like you said, to her vest. She kept them with her.
Yeah.
And, they're with me. So who's going to get them,
Yeah.
And she told very little. She did kind of spout off a couple times and say, I've got the story of the century and I'm going to break it wide open and all that. And then I think she started calming down a little bit there towards the end. She absolutely started calming down when she got scared. It became real on that trip to New Orleans.
Yeah.
And, that's, of course, I can't remember the timeline, but that's when the pictures started showing up of her son in the paper and things like that. And that's when she starts telling Mark that something's going on. Now, this is just my guess, but as I look at Dorothy, and I'm looking at a picture of her right now, she's so powerful, and you find a way to get through things. She was like one of those people to me that she's like me. All of a sudden a mountain comes up in your day and you decide whether to go through it, over it, or around it. You just fix the issue and you move forward. That's kind of person she is to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing that she had so many walls put up, but she also had a little bit of a vulnerability. And she had an Achilles heel. And I think that in some ways she felt a little, let's just say, vulnerable again in one department. She was very lonely. And she was not getting, she was being very fulfilled in many ways. But like all people, we all have that one crack in our windshield. And it's something has been done for millennia to men. You send in a young, good-looking woman, and they'll be able to get any information they want out of a guy. Happens all the time. The toughest ones fall. I think this is what was done to Dorothy. Now, here comes Bo Ron Pataki.
Good.
At a very, very opportune time. Do you agree? Out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about him, if you don't mind.
Well, he was a Midwest journalist, Columbus, Ohio journalist, and good-looking and much younger than Dorothy. And he conveniently, you hit it right on the head. Boy, you're good at this. Dorothy would love you. He came in conveniently into her life, and she really fell for him, and they
Mm-hmm.
had, despite his denials, a romantic relationship, and
Mm-hmm.
but she started sharing with him, and she's the only person she really shared much with about her JFK assassination.
Sure. She trusted him.
And evidence, and he denies that happened, and then he gives conflicting accounts of all that. But
Mm-hmm.
they got very close,
Mm-hmm.
and she thought she could trust him. She even went to Columbus to meet his mother, and
Yep.
all of that. And so, as you get to November of 1965, she is shoveling her material to him.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about the district attorney's bogus investigation last year when I convinced them to investigate Dorothy's death for the first time in 50 years. But I'll always remember when I sat with the chief investigator last June to talk about Dorothy, and he talked about her being a victim and all this. But one of the first things he said is, I wonder if Ron Pataki sold Dorothy's JFK assassination evidence for money.
Wow.
And Ron Pataki was not, he wasn't wealthy. The job didn't pay him much. We've proven in the new book through some relatives of his that she actually bought him a car, and she gave him money, and she helped him along, and all of that. So he was in a perfect position
Mm-hmm.
to have been a Judas, to have
Mm-hmm.
squealed her information to the wrong people. He could have easily been connected to either Marcello or J. Edgar Hoover, and we show that in the new book.
He
But
even went to assassin school, for Pete's sake.
well, that's what I'm just going to say.
Oh,
In the
I'm
new
sorry.
book, we have even more information about his violent past,
Mm-hmm.
a drunkard, violent with women.
Mm-hmm.
At Stanford, flunked out after some violence, admitted to going to an assassin school in Central America. But the most compelling new evidence in the book that the DA had with them and did nothing about was the fact that I showed them that he had admitted to a relative of his that he was the last person to see Dorothy alive,
Mm-hmm.
and that the poems he wrote about her, which were very incriminating,
Mm-hmm.
he admitted they were about her. One talks about exactly how she was poisoned with barbiturates, and gives facts that only the killer could know.
Mm-hmm.
So Ron Pataki was in a perfect position and had some complicity in her death. There's no question about that, and I presented that evidence as well as the rest of my evidence to the New York District Attorney's Office last year, and for 8 months they conducted this investigation and then told me that they were stopping it because they couldn't find any evidence that Dorothy was murdered. I just about went crazy at that point, but I decided to take them up on their promise because they said they would reinvestigate this year if I came up with some new evidence. And I certainly have done that in the new book called Denial of Justice. So we'll see if they keep their promise or not.
Keep at it, Mark. Keep at it. Well, I just
What are your impressions of Pataki?
Well, what I said in the beginning. Here it is. I know he's still alive.
Mm-hmm.
I know you sent him a book. And when I heard you sent him a book, I went, it's like, all right, Mark.
I told him about the new one here, too.
Well, it's completely fair. Here's what we're putting in there so you have any response. And from what I understand, he didn't respond. I know you've spoken to him and you tried to get him to speak. And I think at one point in time, you even had a moment there where you thought he was going to let it go. At least at the very least, if he didn't have a hand in it, he knew who did, or he was part. It just makes perfect sense. It doesn't make any sense that he was just there. And I'll tell you what's incriminating about him. The things he said about Dorothy. Now, why would you woo somebody, become their friend? Of course, they had common things to talk about, being reporters and stuff like that. And she liked to bounce stories off of him, like he said. Mm-hmm. But however, you talk about the people that were around Dorothy all the time. Dorothy liked to write little love notes. That was just her playing around. There was no love. There was no romance there. Okay. Right. Why did he send her Valentines? That would be big, that you could they came apart and, strewn out and stuff like that. He even got to the point where he said that I think he used the word repulsed him. Like she, something along those lines.
Yeah. He just wanted to make sure that he said he was never going to go past.
He wasn't attracted. He wasn't attracted to her. Okay,
right.
Let me tell you something. There's 2 pictures of him, and he's standing next to her. I defy any woman to look at her face and look at his face and the way he's pointing and the way he's doing things. that was a romance. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have that look in your face,
Mm-hmm.
when you're looking at a child that you love. That's a different look.
Right.
When
Right.
there's something else, they either just got done doing something or fixing to go. I'm telling
Mm-hmm.
you right now, that's that look, and there's no denying that camera captured that. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe a word he says about that. And if he's lying about that, what else is he lying about? No, that's the big one. You
Yeah.
can't get that one past me. Number two, the poems. I don't care if you wrote 5,000 poems in a book. When you're writing a poem, do you happen to have that? Can you read the small one about the bartender?
Well, yeah, there's that one that just talks about fixing two drinks and one of them's poison and don't tell me which one.
Mm-hmm.
The other one I like in the just a short one is, basically the reporter's lips would be shuttered or zipped closed or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I mean, he
How to
he,
how
he
to
you
shut
see,
up a
Brett
reporter?
Tacky
Yeah.
would have his career would have ended if Dorothy would have exposed him as leaking her JFK assassination, and Mark Sinclair tells us
Mm-hmm.
that she believed that he have been doing that. That's why there was the confrontation
Absolutely.
with them the night before at the Regency Hotel before she ended up going home.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that she at one point was either at the Regency Hotel bar or at home was poisoned. And
Right.
Pataki was in the perfect position to have done that. So
Absolutely, and
you look at
everybody knew it. Everybody
as a
knew that
criminal
they
defense
went
lawyer, you always look at means, motive,
right.
opportunity, and benefit from the crime. Well,
And
he
the
had
Regency
the
was,
motive,
yeah,
the means and opportunity were easy,
right,
and the benefit from the crime was that Dorothy was dead and couldn't expose him
right,
as being the one who leaked her JFK assassination
right.
material. So
And he
he's
even
the
made
main
a phone
suspect,
call.
that's for sure.
When
Yeah.
was the phone call? Was that night, or was that just days before the death? When he
Now,
called and left the key and they announced it, and she was upset.
that was somewhat before that,
Okay.
but people need to read again, and it's all there in the Denial of Justice. To look at what Pataki says and look at the conflicts in
Yes.
what he says, and
Exactly.
he hangs himself. And
Absolutely.
if any DA would really interrogate him, there'd be no question that they would be able to break him down, and I think he would confess to what he had to do with it.
Right. And it was not out of practice for them to meet at the Regency. And even Mark
No,
Sinclair says they liked the Regency because you could enter 3 different entrances, which she was still
exactly.
trying to keep up appearances. She was still trying, even though that, she made out in public with Johnny Ray. You still try to keep it up. That's just what you did back then. And when he called and said that he was leaving a key at the front desk at the Regency, just, basically, and they announced that over at the What's My Line
Right.
dressing rooms, she was appalled by that because,
She was.
she was still a married lady. She was still
That's
trying
right.
to keep up those appearances, and that just irritated her. So let's try to go to the day. Now, she does the What's My Line, which is a live show, and it was it Saturday or Sunday night?
Sunday night.
Sunday nights. And it was practice for her to, of course, see Mark Sinclair, which she probably saw just about every day, if not 2 times a day on sometimes. She got her hair fixed. Now, Mark Sinclair picked some flowers out of a vase in the foyer, in the lobby, that he thought would go well with the formal gown she was wearing that night because, you
Exactly.
fixed yourself up, like we said in the beginning, for this show. It was a fashion show as well as a game show. It really was. So he fixes her up. He puts in a hairpiece, which all of us ladies know there's lots of pins, there's lots of things going, it's not
Good
easy
point.
to do.
Right.
She's got false eyelashes. He does her makeup and she looks beautiful. And she's wearing this long gown that he fixed her in and she's ready to go. She gets a phone call. And it's from a gentleman, supposedly, I guess. Somebody gives her the phone call. She goes back and she changes her clothes right before the show or right after into something that's more like I'm going on a quick date to a cocktail. Let's say a cocktail dress. But she leaves her hair and her makeup as is. She does the show. She does a wonderful job. There's one of the guests on the show, which will come prominent later, who is, oddly enough, a young, attractive woman who sells dynamite.
There you go.
And she also guesses that. Okay, much to
Dorothy
her.
does, yes.
Yes, Dorothy does. Absolutely. And the show is over. And she goes. Now, she goes, she went someplace before the Regency, didn't she?
Yeah, that's when she goes with the associate producer of the show, Bob Bach, and in the new book, he even explains how What's My Line came about, and Arlene Francis does, and all that, which is quite interesting in Denial of Justice. But she goes to P.J. Clark's,
Okay.
Third Avenue there, and I've been there and sat right next to the table where she sat that night.
Wow.
They have a drink or two there. I've also, and this is again where Dorothy has led me to these almost obscure witnesses, but I found a waitress at P.J. Clark's who remembers Dorothy and where she sat and all of that, and that information's in the new book too.
Wow.
She has a drink or two, and then she heads for the Regency Hotel. And you mentioned Catherine Stone, who was the woman who sold dynamite.
Mm-hmm.
She was invited to the Regency Hotel bar for a little get-together after the show. She saw then Dorothy, and you saw the videotape with Catherine on the DorothyKilgallenStory.org, where she points to the booth where Dorothy was sitting with what we called a mystery man at the time, sitting right close to her. They're in a very serious discussion. There's no laughter whatsoever. And we believe, of course, that was Ron Pataki, because it certainly makes sense it would have been him. She is there, we know, until probably a little after 2 o'clock. Somehow she gets home. We don't know exactly how. We do know from Brenda DeJordan now, Butler's daughter, Dorothy Butler's daughter, that her father heard somebody with Dorothy, heard a door closing, knew somebody was with Dorothy, didn't know who it was, and then somehow or another, we believe that she was poisoned with not one but 3 barbiturates, and she ended up being found, dead that next morning. First by James Clement, the butler, and then by Mark Sinclair.
Okay.
No investigation. No
investigation. It was completely what a mess. Now, in one of the Sinclair interviews, he had said that Dorothy was getting very agitated. She was tired, and she was talking to him both when he was doing her hair and on a phone call that lasted about an hour, because she said, I need to know where these leaks are coming from. And she says, well, why don't you talk to Bo?
Right.
Now, they both called Ron Pataki Bo. So he said, he's the only new person in your life. And you're telling him all these things. You're telling him all your secrets. And why don't you ask him? And she sat and she thought about it. And not long after, I mean, just if not the next day, within very close to that, that's when she's sitting there having this conversation. And it sounds very much from the eyewitnesses that being a serious conversation. The one thing that stuck with me is this lady who wanted to talk to her. I guess she wanted to get an autograph. She wanted to go talk to Dorothy. She said she kept watching them because she wanted a break in the conversation where she could run up and talk to Dorothy. She said one never came, and when she turned around to get another drink, she was gone. So that's one of the reasons where one can assume or one can guess that was Ron Pataki. So it may not have been. Big surprise, but but
the point is, who else could it have been?
Exactly.
She wasn't seeing anybody else. She was done with Johnny Ray. She wasn't dating anybody else. I mean, who else could it have been?
Right. And even Mark feels that very well it could have been because, he told her, go talk to him. And I think that's when it started to sink in. Now, like I said, being a woman, you don't want to believe this stuff. Not him. I mean, I think it all kind of sunk in on her at that time. Have I really been taken for a ride here?
Yeah, good point. Good point.
And that's when it all starts falling in, and she's so tired. She's got so much coming at her, and I think that's basically, what was breaking down that night. How they got from there to, when the stuff hit, was it given to her there? She was obviously slipped a Mickey. No two ways about it. Either there at the bar. Her drink often had, her favorite drink had tonic in it, quinine, so which would have covered a lot of that.
Vodka tonic, yeah.
It may be in both places. Maybe she was given to it twice. So Mark Sinclair is supposed to go in early that morning to fix her hair because she had to go to a school thing the next day and she wanted to look good, and that had been pre-planned. Nobody else knew he was coming, and he had a key to get in the back door. This was a big 5-story mansion. You could come and go. You know, you could run elephants through the place, and sometimes people wouldn't know it. So don't wonder why he had a key and he got in. He goes in, and he starts setting up, as he says, his curling irons and everything else. And he walks through, I guess, where they would use a bedroom as a dressing room. And he expected her to be there because she had a little, like a office studio that she set up where she felt comfortable. That's where he expected her to be, had done this many times. However, there's a door open with a light on and the air conditioner running, oddly enough. And he walks through and he comes into that room, and that's where he finds her. Now, this is one of the things that gets me. Ladies and gentlemen, any lady out there, if you ever found your husband with somebody else in a bed making out that used to be your master bedroom, would you ever sleep in that bed again? The answer is no. You'd probably burn it. This was the bedroom that this took place in. She never slept in this room again. Her husband had another room. The butler and his family had a little apartment off to the side. And this is where Mark found her. And he was shocked at this because, first of all, again, he knew the story. She would never be in there. She's found sitting up, wearing clothes that she would have never worn, according to Mark, who saw her many mornings. She was she would normally sleep in like socks and comfortable pajamas, just like all of us do. She would have took off all her makeup. She would have took that hairpiece out of her hair. She would have took the flowers out of her hair for sure. Those pins had to hurt. You don't go to sleep like that.
You're right.
And he even said that she had lipstick on one sleeve, like somebody had awkwardly dressed her, and of course the lipstick on the sleeve. I don't think she would have kept that. I think she would have thrown it out. I don't think she would have worn that to bed. She's just not that kind of lady. Okay, the air conditioner's on, and he said that she was cold-natured. She would have had the heat on a day like that, the temperature being what it was. And he assumed that it's possible that they wanted to keep the body cold. That was his assumption, and I kind of tend to agree. That makes sense. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
She's got the book. She's sitting up, and she's got a book that she had already read and commented on. It's upside down, correct? The wrong way you would have positioned it. No reading glasses, which she absolutely would have had to have, in sight.
Right.
The glass that she supposedly drank from and had her last drink or to try to commit suicide or whatever is so far off on the nightstand that you would have had to lean over to pick it up. And the whole scene just seems to be staged by someone who didn't know her very well and said, okay, well, what would she be doing in this position? They certainly didn't know about the bedroom, or they wouldn't have put her there. So I don't understand.
And yet the police come and take a look at that setup, the scene that you've just mentioned, and they don't see anything wrong with that at all. And they just look around and see an empty Seconal bottle. She must have overdosed, and they're gone.
Yeah, I don't understand. Well, that doesn't make any sense, Mark. Let's just say it doesn't make any sense. Now, I do understand why Mark Sinclair got panicked, and he went out the other door. He said there was a piece of paper under the door, which kind of threw me a little. I'm like, what was on that paper?
I wish I knew.
Yeah, don't you? And did he go get the butler, or did the butler kind of meet him halfway? I can't remember.
No,
but then
he used the intercom to get the butler, and remember, then James Clement climbed up the steps very in a very loud way, and of course now we know that James Clement already knew Dorothy was dead by then, because of Brenda, his daughter's his evidence. So
wow, he must have been shocked.
Then and Mark Sinclair was so shocked that he left, went outside. There was a police car in front of the townhouse, which kind of surprised him. But he was gone from there and scared and didn't come back. And so now we have to take Brenda DeJordan's her thoughts about exactly what happened, because she says that very shortly thereafter, FBI agents came into the townhouse, and confiscated Dorothy's documents, her papers, everything she had about the JFK assassination.
Mm-hmm.
And when Dorothy was, after Dorothy was dead, those disappeared. And I've alleged, of course, in the new book that the New York District Attorney's Office has knowledge of where they are. And I've suggested in a long letter to District Attorney Cyrus Vance Jr. a grand jury investigation to find those documents. And I sent a 20-page letter to him that's at the DorothyKilgallenStory.org that people can look at, because we need an investigation by an independent prosecutor and a grand jury to take a look at all of this. And of course, just like you said, I mean, right off the bat, all you have to do is think about that staged death scene, and that's a cause right away for an investigation.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. And there's just so many. I mean, can you name the barbiturate off the top of your head?
What they found, I got a copy of the autopsy from the National Archives that had never been published before. It's in both books, Porter Who Knew Too Much, and in Denial of Justice, the new book. It shows in that autopsy report 2 barbiturates, although the medical examiner only told the public about one. That was Seconal, which is sleeping pills.
Right.
Then there's the next one, which is Tulinol, which was written in the autopsy report, but the medical examiner never mentioned it.
Right.
It's a step up, a stronger barbiturate. And then you have phenobarbital, and all 3 barbiturates were found in her system 3 years later when there was a new test of Dorothy's bodily fluids. So we know that 3 barbiturates were in her system, not one. She didn't commit suicide. It wasn't an accidental death. The woman was obviously poisoned and murdered.
Well, that right there alone. Because, I mean, why? That's just insane to think that she would have gone through and taken all of that and then just sat down in the bed and read a book that she already read upside down without her reading glasses, without taking her hairpiece off. For Pete's sake. It just doesn't make any sense at all. And to the fact that, she's there and they go over to the next county to use the medical examiner.
That's right.
Because
Brooklyn,
that one was
Manhattan,
known.
And all of that, and so
Yeah.
it just smells of a cover-up. There's
sure
a
it
rat
does.
out there someplace. And,
Sure it does.
Unfortunately, I haven't gotten quite to the truth yet, but I'm going to keep after it. And people like you, I appreciate your support. You just have done all your homework and know more about Dorothy than most anybody I've ever talked to. So
Well,
I
thank you.
appreciate that, and hopefully your support will make a difference here too.
Well, I hope so. And like Mark said, if anybody out there does have any information, I mean, don't think that, it's so little it doesn't matter, because it might be the little piece that puts some other things together too. And, I certainly don't know who did this, but, if they're still alive and they did, they have to live with it. Dorothy's obviously trying to get, it's amazing how this has come up after all these years. And unfortunately, there are many, many, let's just say, odd and quirky deaths that have come up around, the JFK assassination and anything on the outskirts of it as well. And she's one of them. But let me tell you why this is important. And I'm sure Mark will agree with me. They're all important. Every single solitary one is. But this woman constantly fought for justice for other people. She sat in courtrooms, and that's no easy task. If you've ever sat in a courtroom all day and listened to endless testimony and tried to unravel the mess, of the justice system, and she fought for people, and she stuck her neck out, and she asked the questions, and she pointed the fingers and added question marks to him and said, look, this isn't right. And this isn't right. Somebody took this woman out for what she knew. She trusted an individual at a vulnerable time, and every single one of us, could put ourselves in the place and not fault her for that. She needed a friend, and she wanted to talk to somebody, and she thought she could trust this person. If he didn't do it, as I said, he may have known who. He may have just kept her busy. They even found a pink liquid you think might be Pepto-Bismol, and that's haunted me a little, and I'm trying to figure out, if she may have just been upset, Mark, with the whole situation and took it at the show, You know, she could have gotten it at the bar, but she also could have still been alive at the house and went into her own bathroom and took it.
Well, if the poison, of the barbiturates would have, upset her stomach, she
Right.
easily could have gone in there. My feeling is that that's what happened. She went to the bathroom, she took Pepto-Bismol, but the poison had overcome her system, and she fell on the floor and died right there.
Yeah. And then you heard later on that she was moved.
Well, I don't think there's any question that Richard then redressed her,
Mm-hmm.
wanted her to look good in when they found her, and went in and put her in those clothes and put her in the bed. It just makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But we didn't have that connection until we got Brenda DeJordan's
Right.
test evidence that's in the Denial of Justice book.
Yeah.
There
Well,
you go.
there it is.
What a story, huh?
What a story. I highly recommend that people go. Tell us again the websites, Mark. And I do appreciate, I want to thank you so much for taking this long time, but I wanted my listeners to get it from the beginning so they could appreciate the whole cacophony of information, and we've only touched on it. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more.
Well, thank you, because you're being so, having done your homework and research and everything, and your questions are excellent. You filled in a lot of the material in there that's really important. So I'm sure your listeners will be very happy about the way you've handled this, and I certainly have praise for you doing it.
Thank you.
The websites are the markshawbooks.com, and you can go in there. You'll see the cover of the book, and right there's a link that shows the Jack Ruby trial transcripts. Again, what I believe to be the most important JFK assassination documents in history, and they're exposed right there. And there's some excerpts from the book. Then you can go to the DorothyKilgallenStory.org and learn everything about Dorothy you ever wanted to. But there is a copy of my letter to Cyrus Vance Jr., the New York District Attorney, demanding that he convene a grand jury to look into Dorothy's death.
Can I ask you this, Mark? And I don't know if it would make any difference, but have you ever thought about, I don't even know if they have any weight anymore, but have you ever thought about starting a petition?
I did at one point when the first book came out, and we worked on that for a while, but then the district attorney decided that they would go ahead and investigate.
Mm-hmm.
So we got that done without getting the petition done. I might do something again if they refuse any action this time. We've had so many supporters from around the world. I've heard from people, I think at one point we had almost 800 emails. And that's one reason, The Reporter Who Knew Too Much became a bestseller, because so many just were, it touched the emotions of readers, as I think Denial of Justice will too, and they got upset like you have over how Dorothy was treated, denied justice, and all of that. And so if I don't get action from the DA, I certainly am going to take it to another level.
Mm-hmm.
I should say, by the way, the new book, Denial of Justice, the title, it doesn't just have to do with Dorothy.
Mm-hmm.
It has to do with four people. First of all, JFK was denied justice. He was assassinated.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Ruby never got a fair trial.
Mm-hmm.
Denial of justice. And his case was overturned, and he died before he could get a new trial. Lee Harvey Oswald never got a trial at all. And Dorothy never got an investigation into her death. So it's denial of justice across the board with those four people, and they all deserve better. There's no question about that.
It's just amazing. I'm sitting here listening, and you're going to think I'm nuts for saying this, but I'm going to say it because my listeners are used to it. I say what I think.
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to find the right words because I'm just kind of struck with emotion on this, but what if Dorothy from the other side is trying to get justice for everybody by doing this and getting this out?
I don't think there's any question.
Not just for her.
About that. And I was going to turn in the manuscript for the new book, and then I just had this feeling I needed to wait a little bit. And two things happened. I found a memo from J. Edgar Hoover to the Warren Commission that talks about them trying to about their interrogating Dorothy about her sources for exposing Jack Ruby's testimony before the Warren Commission, where she says in that memo that Dorothy told the FBI agents, "I would rather die than reveal my sources."
Right.
So she found that for me, so I could put it in the book, and then she found the Jack Ruby trial transcripts for me, and both of those would not have been in the new book. I was just about to send in the manuscript, and that would not have been in there. But Dorothy wanted me to include that. So that really goes to your point that she really wants justice for everybody, all four of those people. It needs to be pointed out we're all denied justice.
Right, right. And and she, like I said, she fought so hard, to do that. And I just, it's just, the whole thing is unconscionable, Mark. I mean, just the whole thing from, JFK was JFK. I mean, you think things are going on now. They say at that time, I mean, it was even worse. I mean, there were police officers there that's, when he was shot, they said that they didn't think anything of it. They were glad he was gone. I mean, that was the time. But she looked at all of this, a little bit differently, and maybe through her eyes and her words and your words, we can look at it differently, because an injustice was done that day. It's still going on 50 years later, more plus. And it's time that a lot of this stuff come in. Thank you so much for all the hard work you've done. They're fantastic books. I highly recommend them. Say them again. It's Poison Patriarch.
Well, the first one was A Reporter Who Knew Too Much.
Yes.
And it's still available, and people have fallen in love with that book and really gets your emotions. The new one is Denial of Justice, Dorothy Kilgallen, Abuse of Power, and the most important, most compelling JFK assassination in history. It's out there. It's at all the bookstores and Amazon and everywhere else. But I want to end by saying something that I just thought of. Dorothy is listening to you, Cisco, and I'm sure, positive, completely positive that she's smiling tonight, that she appreciates your support and letting me speak about her, and people hear her voice, hopefully, through both of us. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome, and you're welcome, Dorothy. And I highly recommend too that don't just get caught up in all of this. Go back and look and watch some of the What's My Line. Go back and listen to some of the radio shows. Get to know Dorothy a little bit. Because if you get to know Dorothy just a little bit, all of this will take on new colors, and your emotions will go towards her too, because you can't help but love her. And she deserves everybody to fight for her. She really does. And I thank you, Mark, for spending so much time with us. I hope you'll come back on again, and we can talk about the other things we didn't touch on. And please let us know. Please let me know how the movie is coming about and how you're doing. And if you find any new information, will you do that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Bless you. Thanks so much.
Oh, you're so welcome, Mark. Hang on just a minute. I got something to tell you. Let's cut off. Good night, everybody. Thank you. Well, dear listeners, I cannot thank Mark Shaw enough for coming on and giving us that 2 hours, and I promise you that is just the tip of the iceberg. If you read Poison Patriarch, you will see in there so much that we have been talking about. Please understand, I do believe that a lot of these things are connected. It doesn't mean that Mark is saying that this person had nothing to do with it, or that person had nothing to do with it. What he's concentrating on is this end of it. And if you look at it with an open mind, it really does seem that a lot of it is very connected. There are people who think that, it was absolutely, a plot to kill Kennedy was this person, or it was this group, or it was that group, or it was this guy for sure. Well, hold on a second. I'm going to give you a quote from the wonderful Jim Marrs. Yes. It was all of them. Everybody, they all had a reason to take a part in this. So think about that and understand that Mark is trying to tell you about this side of it as far as Jack Ruby and why Jack Ruby might have been involved, how he got involved in it, that he did know about Oswald beforehand. That's also in the transcripts. You've heard from many other sources that, Jack Ruby was across town, putting out a telegram for one of his dancers, and, he was nowhere near, the Kennedy assassination, that he didn't know Oswald before, that, all these different connections. Everybody's been thrown in all these different directions. But when you start to look at the facts, like I said, in a lot of ways, all this is connected. And I think Mark is going to be bringing up some more. I'm going to have another guest on that talks a little bit about the cast of characters. And although he thinks that his stuff doesn't match up to what Mark is saying, when they both look at it, it really does. So, we might be getting some pieces to this puzzle. And, you think, why now? Why does it matter now? And I'm going to repeat what I said in the show. Whatever you think about, the presidency or John F. K. as a president, I think the poor man thought he was president. He tried to do some things. I'm not for the things, how he lived his life and what he did to his wife and the philandering and all that other stuff. You know what? It's none of my business. He was president. And because he was doing things that somebody didn't like and other people didn't agree with, the man was shot in the head at 12:35 in the middle of the road in Dallas. And then we were told what happened and everybody bought it. And let me tell you something. Other countries, they can't understand why we're so naive to believe what we have been fed. Now, there were good people who put their life on the line to try to bring out the truth. Many of them are dead. I think the loose calculation of that is somewhere up in the 300 line. If you want to read good books on this, I highly recommend all of Mark Shaw's. I highly recommend Jim Marrs, Crossfire, and the revised Crossfire. Listen to some of his interviews as well. And believe it or not, Richard Belzer. The book is called Hit List. And I believe he focuses on 50 of them. Dorothy is one of them. So those writers I know have put this out. There's another gentleman out there by the name of Snowdy. He has videos, YouTube videos out. I don't believe there's a book yet. Cast of characters. Take a look at that. See what you think. If you are someone who believes that, it was just a lone nut theory and that it was, Oswald all by himself and he did it all by himself and that's the way it all went down, that's okay. That's fine. That you guys get to believe what you want to believe. But I suggest you look at some of the other facts that have gone on and come to your own conclusions. This is a real good place to start. And if you get all, bogged down and kerflubbled by all the JFK stuff, I can understand that. Focus on Dorothy. That woman was found in her bedroom, like I said, and like Mark said, in her own home. And everybody just, even the people that knew her, the closest people to her that she worked with every day and around her, they knew she wasn't a drug addict. They knew she wasn't an alcoholic. They said that she could sit there. She had to, for her job, be able to sit at a table full of men and hold her own and hold her liquor. And she knew how to drink and keep her head. And even though she was small in stature. And, any of us that have had to do that, we know. That you can do that. She wasn't an alcoholic. She could not have pulled off the things and the articles that she wrote and the things that she did within her busy day and been an alcoholic and a drug addict and pulled those things off in front of all the people who saw her and all the multiple videos and everything else. Look at her. Watch some of the videos. You come to your own conclusion. So, people were just way too quick to believe that she either committed suicide or she did an accidental drug overdose. Well, you've heard what was in her system. So, that's not accidental. And we don't think it was suicide. So, there's that. What happened to the papers? What was in them? We don't know. We may never know. But Dorothy knew. And apparently she knew too much. So, there's that. Thank you all for listening tonight. This was a little bit different than we normally do, but because I honestly believe that Dorothy's kind of helping from the other side, this might be a real-time paranormal event as well. because Mark didn't get a chance to tell you all the different things and the way he's fallen on a lot of this information. And it was pretty miraculous, some of the things that he stumbled upon. So, and when he was ready to give up, different things happened to help him, come up with another piece of information that propelled him forward. And it's pretty amazing. So Dorothy may very well have a hand in this. So there you go. Thank you for listening. Please share the show. Don't forget about tpublic.com. We've got Christmas coming up and gift giving time. And who wouldn't like a mug with Crispy, our little mascot ghost, on it? We've got the logo. We've got some different cover art on there from different popular shows. It's fun, and they've got a lot of really good products. You can get anything from mugs or travel mugs. My personal favorite, I love the travel mug with the Crispy logo on it. You have to go into the mugs and then press the arrow down, you'll see travel mugs, and that's the way all of them work, as far as different t-shirts. You got baseball t-shirts. You got hoodies and onesies. No, we still don't have adult onesies. I'm sorry. People keep asking. Just regular onesies. I can't imagine, but that's so funny. So there's that. And even if it's just a sticker, this show is absolutely free. I'm the only one here doing this, and all that, I get a little bit from that, and that goes right to the cost of doing this show and getting it to you every week and trying to get you good guests and stuff like that. I don't have editors and, people calling and making appointments for me and, getting my show up and doing all this other stuff. It's just me. And that does help some. So I thank everybody. It's tpublic.com/users/Sysco, SYSCO. So go in there and grab a sticker or stick in somebody's stocking or something like that. That would be awesome. That's that. If you have any stories you would like to share, go to journeythroughthegate@gmail.com. Send them to me. We're compiling listener story episodes. If you have any guest requests or ideas or comments on the show, put them there. Go to Journey Through the Gate Paranormal Portal Podcast, Gatekeepers, to become a gatekeeper. Put your stories in there. Support the other gatekeepers. There's some fantastic, well-known people in there, and people who really know what they're doing. We're really getting a paranormal SWAT team together here, and it's a wonderful place to just, tell your stories and, not be ridiculed. And, it's just a good page. So that's on Facebook. Also, don't forget, the book is out. Steve Stockton and I co-wrote a book called We Are All Children in the Wilderness of the Afterlife, a guided tour through a haunted life. And that is basically my life. So we take you through, and I tell you some of the things that have happened that are paranormal or supernatural, just plain uncanny and unexplainable. But we go through that, and Steve kind of goes through as a color commentary. It's a little bit different, and it's nice, and it's always fun to, after you hear a real scary story and I'm finished, and you got Steve, and he comes in with his anecdotes and his, lines, or maybe a story that it reminded him of. So it's kind of interesting, and that is available on Amazon Kindle. Right now it's in ebook. We are working on the printed copy of that, and that should be available in paperback, we hope, within this week. We're really trying. It's not as easy as it sounds, because all the templates change, and you have to make sure all the, everything lines up right and everything. So we're working on that. Steve was supposed to be on with me tonight, and he had a horrible migraine. God bless him. And we missed him tonight, but I hope I tried to do my best on this show, and it was a lot of research, and so really put my heart into it, and I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, it's a little different, but my gosh, what a story, right? And there it is. Thank you so much, and don't forget, like I said, share the show. Go in there on Conflict Radio YouTube, and if you have heard the show, just give it a like, or share it on your social media. We really appreciate it. It helps Conflict out. It helps me out. It helps the show out. Also on Black Swamp Radio, unknownspirit.com. We're on there as well. They have a terrific chat room. And also Conflict is doing something new too, where we've got live chat when he premieres the show. So you can go in there and live chat and put your information, put your questions or whatever. And I try to go in there and answer them along the way. So that's kind of cool. And just something new Conflict Radio is trying. So we're really getting out there and we're trying some new things. We've got some new things coming up. And that's basically it. Happy holidays to everybody, whatever you're celebrating. I hope you have a wonderful time with your friends and family. Keep your friends and family close. And I'm sure Dorothy didn't expect anything to happen that night, when she went home. So make sure you tell those that you love them. Let them know. And don't take any day for granted. Okay? Tomorrow's promised to no one. So make today count. And most of all, keep your feet under those covers. Keep your closet door shut, because there are things that go bump in the night.